Hi everyone. In previous videos we have seen about a pattern of chain of responsibility that which will comes under behavioral pattern. Today I am here with you to give an explanation about a pattern that which also comes under behavioral pattern is a command pattern. Coming to the introduction of Coming to the introduction of this command pattern is command pattern is a data driven and falls under a behavioral pattern category. A request is wrapped under an object as a command and pass it to appropriate object which can handle this command and passes the command to the corresponding object which execute it. Let us see a small example for this. Here we are seeing just a communication between client and server. So let us consider that this is a client or user. So here is server or receiver. So here is the person who wants to send the request to the server or receiver. What the receiver does here, he will receive the request and he will execute that request and he will respond to the client based on his request. This is the task which has been done between client and server. So what the client does, client sends a request to the receiver and after handling the request by receiver, he will execute that request and he will send it to the client. In this client will become as a sender and the server will become as a receiver. In this, the request has been encapsulated as an object and forwarded to the server. So each and every request has been encapsulated as an object at client side, and then the request, consider the request as an object and then forward to the server. If the server is able to handle the request, he will handle the request and he will respond to the client. Here the main thing is a request is wrapped under an object as command and pass it to the appropriate object which can handle the request, which can handle this command and passes the command to the corresponding object which executes it. So this is about the introduction. This is about the introduction. Coming to the intent of this command pattern is it encapsulates a request as an object, thereby letting you parameterize clients with different requests, queue or log request, and supports undoable operation. In this command pattern also known as action and transaction. These command pattern also called as action and the next one in the another name is transaction. Let us see another example for this command pattern is client server interaction. Here we consider three objects. The first one is client, invoker, and the next one receiver. So what the client does, he will send a request to the receiver. A invoker acts between client and server. So what the invoker does is, he will consider the request from the client and he will forward the request to the receiver, the person who will handle that particular request. So this is the task done by the invoker. So before that, what the client does is, client is the sender of a request. At first, before sending the request, these client will consider the data, that what the data he has to send. He will consider the data in a format of, let us assume that he will consider a data in a, suppose in a document. He will consider the data in a document. This document is said to be as an object. So he will consider the data in as a object. So these document consists of collection of command that he has to pass. So he will consider the, first he will consider the data that he has to pass, and then he will send the data to the invoker. He will pass the request to the invoker. From client to invoker, the command, the data has been passed. This invoker will consider the request. This invoker will consider the request and he will pass the request to the receiver. The receiver who will exactly handle this command. This receiver knows how to process the command and he goes through the request that has been sent by the receiver. Just receiver receives the request. Receiver receives the request. The every possible request has been encapsulated in a stack of papers that has been handed over by the invoker from client. Sorry, that has been handed over by the invoker from client, and that data has been forwarded to the receiver who will handle the request. So client will send the request to the receiver will receive the request and he will perform the request. But what the invoker does is, he just the person lies between client and receiver, and this invoker handle all the objects coming from the client, all the requests coming from the client, and that has been handed over to the receiver who will who will perform the particular command, who will execute the particular command. So this is the task done by the invoker. Coming to the motivation, in this motivation, we will speak about the problem that has been occurred and how that has been solved by using this command pattern. Sometimes it is necessary to issue request to object without knowing anything about the operation being requested or the receiver of the request. Let us consider an example diagram for this motivation. In this, for example, user interface toolkit include objects like button, menu, menu items. They carry out a request in response to user input, but the toolkit can't implement the request in response to user input. But the toolkit can't implement the request explicitly in the button menu because only application that use the toolkit knows what should be done on which object. As toolkit designer, we have no way of knowing the receiver of the request or the operation that will carry it. To solve this problem, what the command pattern does is, the command pattern lets toolkit object make request of unspecified application object by turning the request itself into an object. This object can be stored and passed around like other object. The key to this pattern in abstract command class, which declares an interface for executing operations. In the simplest form to say that is, subclass specifies a receiver action pair by sorting the receiver as an instance variable and by implementing execute to invoke the request. The receiver has the knowledge required to carry out the request. In the simplest form, this interface includes an abstract execute operation, but the concrete command subclass specifies a receiver action pair by sorting the receiver as an instance variable and by implementing execute to invoke the request. Menu can be implemented easily with command object. Each choice in a menu is an instance of menu item class. An application class creates this menu and their menu items along with the rest of the user interface. The application class also keeps track of document object that a user has opened. The application configures each menu item with an instance of a concrete command subclass. When the user selects a menu item, the menu item calls execute on its command and executes carries out the operation. Menu item doesn't know which subclass of command they use. Command subclass stores the receiver of the request and invoke one or more operations on the receiver. By considering motivation, let us see an example command that how it has been executed. Suppose if I want to open a document, so what we have to do? We have to call an open command. We have to execute open command. In that open command, we have to execute the different operation. Open command execute operation is different. It promotes the user for a document. It promotes the user for a document for its document name, and it creates a corresponding document object and adds a document to the receiving application and opens the document. So in such a way, the document has been